Misharvu harוצחין וכולי. Tanu Rabbanan. Misharvu harוצחונים batla egla rufa. When murders increased, the egla rufa ceremony was cancelled. Lefi she'eino bo elo al hasafek. The whole egla rufa is brought when we are in a state of true doubt. Misharvu harוצחונים begalui batla egla arufa. So what the Gemara explains is that when this Tanaic source says Misharvu harוצחונים, it really means when ratzchonim in public, when public murders became popular, so then everyone knew who the murderer was. So there's no more need for egla arufa. Misharvu hanoafim v'chulei tanu rabbanan. The pasuk says in the topic of Sotah, v'nika ha'ish me'avon, and we darshan this bizman sho'ish menuka me'avon, when the husband is free, is clean from sin, hamayim boikim es ishto. Then, if you have we'll say a righteous husband, and he has a wife that he's suspected of immorality, she can be brought to the Beis Hamikdash, and the water will be effective in revealing the act, or if she's innocent, so nothing will happen. If the husband is not so righteous himself, he's not clean from sin, the wife of such a man will not be checked out by the Sotah waters. The Oimer, the pasuk says lo, and in addition, the pasuk says lo efkoid al benoisechem kisis nana b'chulei. We read and explained that pasuk before, and here the Gemara wants to know, my v'yomer, what do I need that additional pasuk for when we had the opening pasuk v'nika ha'ish me'avon? So the Gemara explains, and it's in several stages, and that's why you have this double underlining marking to explain to what extent do we go when we say that when there's a society of sin, that the water will not be effective. V'chi tema avon didei in. You might say that from the pasuk of v'nika ha'ish me'avon, when the man is clean from sin, so the water will check, that the only concern is his own sinfulness. That meaning, if the husband himself is sinful, so then the water will not check out. But dibonei u'divinasei lo. If the man is righteous, but his children, he has a family, his sons, his daughters are immoral, so then the water will remain effective with regard to his wife. Toshma, that's not so. You can have a situation where the man himself, the husband himself, is righteous, but his children live immoral lifestyles. The pasuk says, "Lo efkod al benosechem ki sizneno v'al kaloisechem ki sino afno." That pasuk indicates that I, the Almighty, says, I remove myself. I won't enable you to have the benefit of these Sotah waters if your sons, if your daughters and your sons live a life of immorality. V'chitema avon eishes ish in avon depnuyolo. You might say that, okay, the waters are canceled from being effective if the nature of the sin is married women behaving immorally. Let's say one has a son, a daughter, particularly a daughter, that she's a single woman, and she leads a loose lifestyle. That is not going to stop the waters from being effective. That the only concern would be a man whose family behaves immorally in the realm of Eishes Ish. Well, we have news. Ki heim im hazoinos yiforedu v'im hakedeshos yizabechu. The term zonos, harlotry, is most often associated with unmarried women behaving, having intimacy with all kinds of men. But yet, the very pasuk that we quoted which started lo efkod al b'nosechem mentions kihem im hazonos yiforei. They behave, even the single women behaving immorality will stop the Sotah waters from being effective. The pasuk goes on to say, and we ask here, "Mai ve'om lo yovin yilo beit." What does that mean? Omar Rabbi Ozer, Omar lem Novi Yisrael. The Novi, the prophet, addresses Israel. Im atem makpidim al atzmechem. If you are diligent with regard to yourselves, you're moral and chaste, so mayim boikim nishosechem. The waters will be effective in checking out your wives if they fall under suspicion. The imlav, if you're not careful with yourselves, if you're loose and immoral yourselves, ein hamayim boikim nishosechem. The waters will not check out your wives. So the person cannot think to himself that, well, I'll do whatever I want, but with my wife, I'm going to be strict and restrictive and supervising, etc., and so forth. Not at all. If a person has to be himself of moral upstanding in order for him to even think that his wife will be subject to the scrutiny of the water. We have, as you can see, a very long Tanaic source. On the side of the Gemara, we have a topic heading, and you'll also notice the mivneh, the structural note. Let me just correct myself. We indicated earlier the structural note, the triangle, highlighting the term misrabו. And we continue with that marking here, and our note says, the Nosay says, Ribui tofaos agormos ivus hadin. See, many developments and behaviors that result in the contortion of justice. The Gemara. Misharabhu bale hano nisavsu hadinim v'niskalkalu hamaisim v'ein noyach ba'olam. Upon the increase of the bale hano, literally would mean the pleasure seekers. When pleasure seekers come about, pleasure seekers can also be associated with people that want things easy, aren't the type of people that are willing to let's say research things, to extend themselves, to strain themselves to find the truth. So when you have that situation of Bali Hano on the increase, so justice becomes contorted, and Niskalkla Maisim and the practices and the righteousness becomes distorted. There's no Noach. Noach is pleasantness in the world. This term, by the way, of Nisavsu Adinim v'Niskalkla Maisim, we've seen earlier, back on Daf Mem Aleph Omid Beis, in the context of Mishe Yorda Egroifa Shel Chanufa. And I recommend looking at the Rashi that describes these terms back there on Mem Aleph Omid Beis. Mishiravu Roye Ponim Badin Botel Lo Soguru. The expression Roye Ponim might very well refer to judges who appear to favor one of the litigants over the other. When that happens, then people who come into a court case, with that, botel means there's stopped being concept of lo soguru. Lo soguru meish is a pasuk which demands of judges not to be fearful of the litigants. Don't be fearful of anybody. And if you're having judges that play favorites, apparently the judge feels intimidated by one of the litigants. So you see that this pasuk will no longer be fulfilled. And upasuk lo sokiru. Lo sokiru is a pasuk which commands judges not to show favoritism. But if rovu roe ponim, so we're no longer fulfilling the pasuk of lo sokiru, not to play favorites. Uparku o shamayim v'nosaleim oil baser badam. With this, you have the shirking off of the yoke of heaven, and that being replaced with the yoke of men. The judge feels intimidated. He feels pressured by mankind. Baser badam, man is above him, and not the Lord alone. Misharvu lוחשי לחישות בדין Rabo Charoin Af B'Yisrael. What is meant by Lוחשי לחישות? So we look in Rashi. He says, Orchei hadayonim umislachshim im hadayon liftoch lehem pesach b'schusu shel zeh u'b'choivoso shel zeh. These are Lוחשי לחישות, intermediaries that work on behalf of the litigants, and these people will go and literally they'll whisper in the ears of the judges why they should favor one over the other. There should not be intermediaries in court cases. Rather, the judges listen directly to the litigants' own arguments, and that's the way justice is to take place. So with these intermediaries intervening on behalf of one side or the other, so then Rabba Charon Af B'Yisrael, heavenly wrath is increased on the Jewish people, V'nistalka Shechina, and the divine presence departs. Mishum Shenemar, the Pasuk says, and the Girs on the side suggests reading from the earlier part of the Pasuk, Elokim Nitzov Badas El Bekerev Elohim Yishpot. The Almighty is present when He is amongst judges. The suggestion here is that, well, if there are people other than the judges that are present, namely have these Lוחשי לחישות, so the Almighty is not present, and that's Nistalko Hashchina. Misharvu Achrei Bitzom Libam Holech. When there was an increase of those that follow the lust of their hearts, so again, you have this contorted justice. Ravu Ha'imrim, you'll find the increase of those that say Lara Tov, that which is evil is good. They praise the wicked. V'la Tov Ra, and those that claim that which is actually good say is no good. Misharavu ha'imrim l'ra tov l'tov ra. Here you can see there's a progression, and when there's an increase of those that praise the wicked and demean the righteous, the positive. Ravu hoi ba'olam. The term hoi is like we say the word woe, and you find in the prophet, in the Novi, you find this word on numerous occasions, and hence the reference made here. Misharavu Moshche Haroik, Ravu Hayehirim. Moshche Harok literally is people that draw their saliva. Rashi explains it's some type of behavior that's characteristic of the haughty. So when haughtiness increased, so there was the Ravu Hayehirim. Yehirim, Yuhara, is a word referring to the Balei Gaiva, those haughty individuals. So when you saw this practice, you can rest assured there were a lot of haughty people on the increase. When you have haughtiness is characterized by those who say, I know everything. I have nothing to learn from you. A Talmud, a student, is someone quite the opposite. He's coming to say, I don't know everything, I need to learn from you. So with the increase of the Yehirim, there's a decrease of Talmidim, of students. And the Torah is, so to speak, is seeking out who will only come to learn from me. The Torah, as its name suggests, it's instruction from Hora'ah, a source of instruction. If you have people that are overcome with the spirit of haughtiness, they don't turn to the Torah for instruction. They know everything. So the Torah, in a society like that, is seeking out those who will learn from it. Misharavu hayehirim, hischilu b'nois Yisrael linosay lehirim. When the haughty increased, the Jewish daughters, the women of Israel, sought out to marry these kind of people. She'ein doreinu roeh elo lifnim. Our generation only sees that which is viewable, the external. And you have people that carry themselves as if they know everything, and inflated chests and whatever. We'll limit all the possible examples that we could give, but nevertheless, that would serve to attract the women. The Gemara interrupts this Tanaic source, and you can see we have brackets here. The next two lines later, at the beginning of the line, the series continues. However, in the meantime, the Gemara asks on this very last point, since when is it so that women are attracted to the Yehirim, those people that have that puff themselves up? Aini, is that so? V'amar more. Haiman de miaher, someone who is haughty. Afilo inshi beise lo mikbal. Even on inshi beise means literally the members of the house, but it's a term referring to even upon one's wife. He is not accepted. Shnemar gever yohir v'lo yinovei. That's the pasuk, and it's darshan lo yinovei means afilu b'nevei shalom. Yinovei means a dwelling. He won't be accepted. A gever yohir, a man who is proud in the negative sense, won't be accepted even in his own house, even by his own wife. So the Gemara explains, Meikara Kapsale, at the beginning, when the men are courting the women, and they're going on dates, and they're meeting one another, so they're attracted to these kind of people. However, when they get to live with them, Lasof Mitzilalayo, they become cheapened upon them. In other words, the women who are married to these the haughty ones no longer have any respect for them. Misharovu Matiyle Mlai al Bale Batim. When there's an increase of Matiyle Mlai, so we have to explain what is that. Rashi says Matiyle Mlai, Hadayonim Matiyle Mlai. Mlai is Prakmatia Shalahem, merchandise. Al Bale Batim. Judges, people of, let's say, rabbinic authority who sit in judgment, they're also people. They need a source of income. What's described here? The judges would have some, let's say, cash and buy merchandise, but they weren't going to be the ones to actually market their merchandise. What would they do? They would seek out members of the community to, as Rashi says, it goes on, hayoyde b'tiv schara, that were familiar with commerce, she-yistakru hadayonim hayodo. These yoyde b'tiv schara, these local merchants would market the items bought by the dayanim, and they would share in the profits, and the dayan would thereby make money. However, there's a problem here. The dayan, the rabbinic figure, who is now reliant upon these members of these local merchants to market their own merchandise. The Gemara goes on, Rabo hashochad v'atoyus mishpadu poska toiva. There was now increase for shochad, bribery. There's room for bribery, and in other words, the judge can actually, by having someone be quite successful in marketing his own merchandise, that itself would represent a potential bribe in his eyes, and that results in contorted justice. Upaska toiva, and the good benefit will cease. Umisharabu mekable toivascho umachzikeni toivascho. When this became when this was on the increase, people who would receive favors and be beholden to others for favors done to them, ravu ish hayosher bi'enov yaseh. Then there would be there's people who. You have judges that become beholden to the members of the community for favors done to them. So then those people who did the favors wouldn't feel any pressure to conform to the rule of law, and ish hayosh beinav yasa, people would do whatever they want to do. Shvelim hugvahu, the lowly would rise. Vagvoyim, those who were on top, hushbalu, would be lowered. Umalchusa ozla v'navla, and the government will continue to decay. These are comments that are, to say the very least, very, very prophetic. When you have people in governmental positions, decision-making positions, judging positions of justice, and they're involved with all kinds of financial dealings that we've been describing at great length over here. So, of course, the honor given to the government, the seriousness in which or respect that people would grant their governmental officials declines more and more and more. Umalchusa ozla v'navla. Misharabut sorei ayin v'torfei teref. When miserliness, sorei ayin, are people that are, as Rashi says, milahanu sachim b'mamonim, people that are unwilling to benefit others through their own financial capabilities. And torfei teref, Rashi says, gazlonim, thieves, umamsei alev minayim, people who withhold their hearts from assisting the poor. So when this increases, Ravu Mamse Alev v'Koifsi Yadayim Milahalvos, when you have people of a miserly nature, unwilling to help others, so you have people then withholding, clenching their hands, closed on their money, unwilling to loan others. Milahalvos is to loan others. The Avru al Mashikosa b'Torah, and are thereby violating that which the Torah says. He shomer l'cha pen v'chulei. The pasuk warns against those who refuse to extend loans. The Torah expects of us to assist others financially. So, but if the spirit of the day is one of miserliness, that inevitably is going to lead to a violation of this negative command from Dvarim Perek Tezvav. Misharabbu nitoyas goron u'mesakroy seinayim. This is a reference to the topic of immorality and immodesty. Nituyas goron and mesakro seinayim is a reference to women who walk in, let's say, in a alluring fashion. And mesakro seinayim, you can see in the word mesakros the word mascara. In fact, it has to do with cosmetics, alluring looks. So if that's the society in which you find yourself, be aware, Ravu Mayim Hamorim Elo Shepasku. There'll be an increase for the need for the Sotah waters, but they won't work anymore. Misharavu Mekable Matonos Nismatu Hayomim V'Niskatsu Hashonim. When you find a society where people are happy to receive gifts, so the result of that is shortening of days and shortening of years, meaning people won't merit living to their full life expectancy. The pasuk says, "V'soine matanos yichya." He who has a disdain for gifts and doesn't accept gifts will live. Misharavu zechuche halev ravu machlokes b'Yisrael. When there's an increase of zechuche halev, Rashi explains, Zechuche halev she'ein matines onznam lishma yofim mipirabam v'soimchem al binosam ledaktek shmuasam. These are people that don't listen too carefully to their teachers, to their rabbonim, and they rather rely on their own intuition and their own knowledge to come to conclusions. So when you have that, so you have an increase of machloikas, of controversy in Israel. The source goes on to illustrate a situation like that. Mishiravu Talmidei Shammai v'Hillel shelo shimshu kol tzorchan ravu machloikis b'Yisrael. When there was an increase of the students of Shammai and Hillel that in fact did not study enough by their teachers, that resulted in disagreement and controversy in Israel. V'naseh Torah kishtei Toros, and it almost appeared as if there were two Toros. And we know how difficult a situation that could be, which at times in history actually resulted in sections of Israel breaking off from the main trunk of the Jewish people and then disappearing into the annals of history, no longer being part of the mainstream of Judaism. So this situation of Nasis Torah Kishtei Toros is something that's a very threatening situation. Mishiravu Mekable Tzedakah min Oivdei Kechavim, and when there was increase of accepting charity from the idol worshippers, from Gentiles, Hayu Yisrael Lamala V'Heim Lamata. This is a euphemism. The translation is the Jews were up and the Goyim were down, but not so. It's as we say, euphemism. When Jews become dependent on the Gentiles for charity, for support, so the Gentiles then gain the upper hand and the last say, and they're on top, and the Jewish people are down. Yisrael lifnim v'heim lochor. Again, a euphemism, which the translation would be the Jews are in front and they're in back, but that's not what the intention is. It's the opposite. Mishemes Yosi ben Yoezer v'chulei. The Mishnah mentioned Botlu ha'eshkolos. My eshkolos. What is meant by that term? Omar of Yehuda, Omar Shmuel, Ish shakol bo. A person in whom everything is found. We explained this earlier, and it's a reference to people who did not have any, let's say, doubts. There was no machlokas, there was no controversy until his time. Up till his time, the people who studied Torah studied with the same, say, level of clarity as the Torah was given from Moshe at Har Sinai. But at that point in time, machlokes went on the increase. Yochanan Kohen Gadol havir hodoyas hamaiser. Yochanan Kohen Gadol stopped the Meiser declaration, and we mentioned this earlier. That has to do with at the end of after 3 years and the 7th year of the sabbatical cycle, people would announce through reciting psukim in the Torah that they fulfilled all the laws of tithing properly. My timer, why in his time did they stop the hodoyas Meiser? Omer Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina lefi she'ein noisen also ketikuno. Listen, his time, they weren't giving the Meiser as the Torah intends. The Torah says that Meiser, specifically Meiser Rishon, is given to the Levium. It's 1/10 of a person's produce each year of the 6 years of the 7-year sabbatical cycle. 7th year being as its name, a sabbatical year. There's no tithing then, but during the 6 years of agricultural produce, 1/10 of one's produce is given from the Torah standpoint, it's supposed to be given to the Levi. We continue at the top of Daf Mem Ches, Ve'anan koyavinon lekohanim, and we give the Meiser Rishon to the Kohanim. The reason for that is there was a knas, a fine imposed on Levium in the time of Ezra that they no longer deserved receiving the Meiser Rishon tithe. The Gemara asks, Velodi ashar Meisros. Granted, we don't give the Meiser Rishon anymore as the Torah intended, but the other tithes we give properly. For example, Meiser Sheni, that's the tithe, 10% of one's produce. 1st, 2nd, 4th, and 5th years, one takes those fruits to Jerusalem and eats them there. On the 3rd and 6th year, we tithe the Meiser Oni and give that to the poor. So why don't we at least announce our fulfillment of the other tithes? Any household that is incapable, and no one is capable anymore of announcing his fulfillment of the Meiser Rishon Levi tithe, Shuv Ein Misvada Al Shar Meisos. He no longer is entitled to be misvada, to announce his fulfillment of the other tithes. My taimo, why is that? What's so significant about the Meiser Rishon that everything else is dependent on that? Omer Abaye, Hoyu uposach boy hakosuv tchila. Since it was the first of the tithes to be mentioned in the section of the Torah dealing with tithes, so if the first one falls, so to speak, everything falls by the wayside as well, and no more, therefore no hodoyas meiser regarding the other tithes. The Gemara asks, Michlal, and this is the beginning of a long question, Michlal da'afrushe havu mafreshi. What we've said till now is that the Meiser Rishon Levi tithe, it was tithe, but it wasn't given to the Levium. We explained it was given to the Kohanim as a result of a fine imposed by Ezra at the beginning of the Second Temple period. You're implying, though, that they did separate the Meiser Rishon tithe. Tanya, but we have a Tanaic source that comprises the bulk of our long question. What do you mean that they tithe the Meiser Rishon tithe? We have evidence to the contrary. It says, Af hu Yochanan Kohen Gadol bitel es havidui. He canceled the recitation of the vidui meisers, the gozar al hademai, and he ruled concerning demai that produce bought from the ignorant must be tithed. We're making the assumption that those who are Amoratzim didn't take care of the tithing. Lafi sheshalach b'chol gvul Yisrael. Yochanan Kohen Gadol had sent scouts, emissaries, representatives amongst within the boundaries of Israel. And he found that the only tithe that people were diligent in tithing was the Truma Gedola. That's the tithe that people give to the Kohanim. There's the amount for Truma Gedola from the Torah standpoint is any amount, even a minuscule amount. Rabbinically, it's approximately, we'll say 2% of one's produce. Now, notice we've underlined the terms Meiser Rishon and Miksosan Ein Ma'asrin. With regard to the Levi tithe and the Meiser Sheni, the Jerusalem-oriented tithe, some tithe, some didn't tithe at all. And it's really from here that we have our question, because before this we suggested that, everyone was tithing the Meiser Rishon tithe, they just weren't doing it the Torah expected way. Here it seems they weren't tithing at all. Omar Lohem, Yochanan Golol said to the population, Bonai, Bo'u v'omar lochem, let me come and let me tell you something. Kashem shetruma gedola, yesh bo avoy misa, just like truma gedola, if it's not tithed, if one eats untithed produce with truma gedola, the latent truma gedola in it, he is guilty of death at the hands of heaven. Well, kach trumas meiser v'tevel yesh bohen avon misa. So too, trumas meiser is 1/10 of the Levi tithe. When a Levi receives his 10%, that Levian has to turn around and give 10% of what he received to a Kohen. That has the same status as Truma. So Trumas Meiser and Tevel. Tevel is a term referring to untithed produce. There are other tithes, like the Meiser Oni tithe, eating untithed produce. Yesh bohen avon misa. If these things aren't taken care of, it results in death at the hands of heaven. So that these people who were concerned with the Truma Gedola alone were doing so out of ignorance, thinking that only the Truma Gedola represents a life threat to them. Omad v'hiskin lohem, Yochanan HaKohen Berger arose and imposed the following: Halokech peros me'amoretz, a person who buys produce from an ignoramus, mafrish man meiser rishon or meiser sheni. You have to tithe the meiser rishon tithe and the meiser sheni tithe. Meiser rishon mafrish man trumas meiser, and once you set aside the meiser rishon tithe, from that you have to then separate 1/10 called trumas meiser v'noisna l'kohen. That 10% of 10%, that's the meiser of the trumas meiser. You give that to a kohen. U'meiser sheni oilav b'Yerushalayim, and you will take the meiser sheni tithe from that which you set aside from the produce that you bought from the Amoritz, and take it and eat it in Jerusalem. Meiser Rishon or Meiser Oni, with regard to the basic Meiser Rishon that you set aside, and from it you took 10% to give to the Kohen, but the rest, the other 9/10, which is here it's referred to as the Meiser Rishon, and the Meiser Oni, that's the tithe that would be taken on the 3rd and 6th years of the sabbatical cycle, from produce that you bought from the Ama Oretz. Hamotzi mechavero olav haraya. That you can keep for yourself. If someone can prove that the Ama Oretz from whom you bought the produce didn't tithe, then you have to part with it. But as long as that hasn't been proven, Meiser Rishon and Meiser Oni are matters of purely financial concern. They're called mamon. They don't have in them the same level of chumrah, of seriousness, as truma or trumas meiser, that engender not only the fact that it has a mamon side to it, that it belongs to the kohanim, but if it's eaten by a non-kohen, it results in misa bidei shamayim. It's a serious, we'll say, spiritual factor as well. So when it comes to the Meiser Rishon and Meiser Oni, from that you tithe from produce that you bought from an Amoretz, and we didn't explain too much earlier with regard to the Amoratzim. We saw above some tithe, some didn't. It was a matter of doubt. When you have a matter of doubt concerning financial issues, we say Hamotzi mechavero, someone who is trying to extract from his friend. It's upon him, the one who tries to take away, to bring the proof. At this point, though, we've come to the end of our long question. Above, we suggested that he was mevatel, that Yochanan HaKohen Berger was mevatel Hodoyas Meiser, because the Meiser Rishon was tithed, but given to Kohanim instead of Leviim. In this source, we see that there were those that weren't tithing it at all. The Gemara answers, Tarti Tikain. There are actually two stages of ruling, of edicts. Bitul Vidui the Chaverim. He was mevatel the Vidui Maestris of Chaver. Chaverim are, say, a term referring to people who were diligent, as opposed to Am Haratzim, the ignorant. Chaverim are people that are careful. So, with regard to Hodoyas Meiser, on the part of Chaverim, people who certainly tithed, they can't say the Hodoyas Meiser because they're giving their Meiser Rishon to Kohanim and not Leviim. A second edict, the Gozar al Demai shel Amei Haaretz. Produce purchased from those who were not diligent, you need to tithe the Meiser Rishon from the outset, because maybe the Amorats, didn't tithe it at all. So as we said, we have two stages of rulings. One ruling involved the Chaverim, people who were diligent, they had their own fields, and they would tithe the produce from their own fields. The only problem there is that they didn't give their Meiser Rishon to the Torah-ordained receiver, but rather gave it to the Kohanim in accordance with the Knas of Ezra. Therefore, they could not recite the Vidui Meisris. And as far as the reference made to those who weren't tithing at all, yes, that's a reference to Amoratzim who did not tithe at all. Some, actually, a significant part of the population, not necessarily the majority, but many did not tithe. And regarding that situation, the ruling was, whatever you buy from an Amoritz, you must tithe. With that, we conclude our shiur for today.
This was a presentation of the Daf Map. We hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe to be informed of our other videos. For resources and more information, please visit our website at www.thedafmap.com.